There are many rivers, mountains, oceans, and plains in the world, but there is only one region known as the Everglades. Since prehistoric times, man has been drawn to this exotic, mysterious, and largely unexplored water wilderness. Visible even by astronauts in outer space, this 2-million-acre subtropical waterway provides a paradise for wildlife and a vital watershed for South Florida as it meanders southwesterly from Lake Okeechobee down to the Gulf of Mexico. The program you are about to see now documents one of the most extraordinary personal explorations ever made through this area, and one of the longest. For 2.5 years, two intrepid young photojournalists, Barbara Holmes Stewart, a Florida newspaper editor, and her naturalist husband, Orrin Goodfogle, covered 3,500 miles in their 17-foot canoe Nocatee, paddling 1,500 miles of that distance. In 6 months away from civilization, they explored all 12 major rivers of the Glades, living mainly on survival fare and setting an all-time endurance record for canoe camping in the Everglades National Park and 10,000 Islands. They produced an incredible self-photographed film of this classic canoe adventure through an Everglades which few of us will ever see. An Everglades which has almost vanished today because of pollution, politics, and most of all, man.
My husband and I sold all our worldly goods to finance this voyage through the most treacherous alligator and shark-infested waters in the United States. Our jumping-off spot from civilization was Everglades City, the southernmost town on the mainland of Florida's west coast, 75 miles due west of Miami, but light years away in mood, scenery, and tempo. Everglades City, which sits at the mouth of the Barron River on Chokoloskee Bay, is an internationally celebrated winter Shangri-La for fishermen of all persuasions, presidents and politicians, birders and botanists, archaeologists, artists, and adventurers. Whether they are guiding, chartering, or seining, fishermen are the aristocrats of this aquatic area, and many live aboard houseboats called lighters, anchored along the riverbank. Central attraction for the snook and tarpon fishermen is the venerable Rod and Gun Club, first built by George Storter, and world famous for its locals warned us we would need a guide to show us through the labyrinthine rivers and islands. But my husband and I decided to try it on our own, using large-scale aerial charts and a lot of gumption. Our first stop en route was a visit with Uncle Charlie Boggess, a friendly historian and highly respected second-generation pioneer whose grandchildren cross the river every day in a school boat. A longtime commercial fisherman and guide, Uncle Charlie pointed out 6 dry ground campsites where we could pitch a tent along the inland passage through Everglades National Park. "How do you know where the high ground is?" I asked. In the old days of Prohibition, every little patch of high ground had a moonshine still on it, making low bush lightning. And that's where the gator poachers still drag their alligators to skin them out. You folks keep your eyes open. They don't cotton much to strangers. He pointed our way on the map to the tiny, windswept island of Pelican Key, 7 miles out in the Gulf, our new home for the next 8 months. Don't forget to head north when you get to Jewel Key now. Jewel Key was the lone one-tree island that marked that pass for decades until Hurricane Donna swept it away in 1960. I was excited and awestruck by the possibility of spending the next 8 months in a rustic 12 by 14-foot fisherman's shanty on a little island occupied only by one hermit, 2 dogs, and 3 tame egrets. Roy Osmer, described in hundreds of magazines and newspapers around the world as the world's most popular hermit, was not only a cordial host, but a charming, erudite companion. And he had a great sense of humor. Before we unloaded our gear boxes, Roy showed us around his sandy domain, his tropical garden with 350 varieties of plants, and his workshop. We liked his Toonerville trolley house and the sign on his front steps which read, "Well, maybe I wouldn't like your house." We checked out his barometer, a big rock tied by a rope to a post. The sign said, "Barometer. When wind blows rock straight out, it means the approach of bad weather. Patent refused." Patent was also refused on his coffee pot. Roy Osmer made his coffee with no cream, no sugar, and darn little water. It was too thick to drink and too thin to plow. When a visiting doctor asked him how much coffee he drank every day, with his 8,000 to 10,000 visitors every year, Roy said, "Oh, maybe 20, 25 cups. Good heavens, man, doesn't that keep you awake at night?" Roy tugged on his Van Dyke and grinned. "Nope, but it helps." There was no electricity, telephone, refrigeration, or running water on Pelican Key, so we had to improvise everything. Orrin made a crude scale from pie pans to weigh the meager 47.5 pounds of dry food we would carry on a 6-week trip. The trip actually lasted 6 months, so we really learned to improvise. We had no bread, no fresh meat, fruits, vegetables, cheeses, or beans. Instead, we packed megavitamins, raw nuts, dried soups, instant rice, milk, grits and oatmeal, popcorn, and saltines. For that sweet tooth, we took dried fruits, honey, raisins, mincemeat, bittersweet chocolate, and malted milk tablets. Because of the weight, we could not carry ice, lanterns, canned goods, jars, or lard. Here are my kitchen shelves. Orrin designed these out of canvas so that we could hang them up on a tree. They held instant food, utensils, and cleaning items. Our 17-foot canoe, weighing 88 pounds, had a broad beam and a flat bottom with a 1-inch keel. Flotation compartments fore and aft gave it exceptional stability and made it almost untippable, a great advantage when you're carrying a 1,200-pound payload, 900 pounds of gear, and 300 pounds of passengers. Orrin used aviation shock cord to keep our floating boxes tethered to the boat in case we did tip over. To give us a rest from paddling and stretch the gas supply, Orrin rigged the Nocatee to support our mop handles, which became either a mast or a boom when bolted together. I designed and sewed 2 7.5-ounce red taffeta petticoat sails in Everglades City. We could rig them as a mainsail and jib or to sail wing on wing. There was no such thing as a styrofoam boat box in those days, so Orrin designed special aluminum boxes lined with 1 to 2 inches of foam rubber with tight-fitting lids to protect our supplies from the intense subtropical heat and animal predators. We coated all the boxes with red reflector stripes for quick identification at night by flashlight. One fisherman told us that at night, in his spotlight, we lit up like a giant pinball machine. These small camera boxes weighed 60 pounds each and held 150 pounds of camera gear, which included 8 still cameras and only 1 manually operated Kodak 16mm movie camera. We picked the Kodak camera because it had the longest wind-up time and allowed us to shoot longer scenes. There were no other cameramen on this trip. The camp box held our ever-faithful machete, our shovel, motor tools, and 3.5 gallons of gasoline, the most we carried at any one time. Passing fishermen would resupply us as needed. Strapped permanently under the bow seat was a last-ditch survival box. We kept our 2 miles of movie film and enough 35mm film to shoot 5,600 pictures inside these 3 insulated diaper bags. This box also contained our lifeline, a 15-pound tackle box, which was really an instant hospital. It held prescription painkillers, antibiotics, antiseptics, more anti-venom kits, scalpels, sutures, and Novocaine for removing fish hooks, and tons of aspirin. Now, how does a woman who loves crazy hats, fancy shoes, and jewelry pack a 6-month wardrobe in one half of a boat box? Answer: very carefully. We avoided leather boots, which would rot, using sandals and sneakers instead, and all our clothes were drip dry. Often more drip than dry. To stay warm at night, we had thermal underwear and a set of old-fashioned wool long johns, plus 1 blanket apiece. Our painted plywood panels would serve as bilge boards to keep our boxes dry, also as seats, filleting boards, writing desks, a kitchen counter, and photo backdrops. We had these boxes built in Miami and shipped over, praying that they would fit into the 34-inch wide beam of the boat as designed. It was rather like trying to squeeze a very fat lady into a very tight girdle. Energetic, but effective. Our 7 one-gallon canteens would carry us for several days until we could reach the freshwater glades. We thought for a long time about what to call our canoe. We rather liked the sound of Nocatee. Our genial host and his dogs, Boojum and Little Sister, popped up about that time. "We're calling it Nocatee," I explained. "What does that mean?" the hermit asked. "Well, in Cow Creek Seminole, it means the place beyond the river, the unknown land." We thought that sounded adventuresome. Then we learned that in Miccosukee Seminole, it means, I don't know. Either way, it was a fitting title. We were headed into an unknown land, and we surely didn't know what was out there. And last of all came the most important pieces of gear, our 2 trusty paddles, which would take us 1,500 miles of our 3,500-mile voyage through the great green wilderness that had magnetically drawn so many adventurers into its depths. The early fishermen and farmers, renegades and moonshiners, gator hunters and otter trappers. We were on our way at last. Now we are entering an alien world where we would be forced to depend on our skills, our wit, and our instincts just to get food and stay alive. We remembered the warning of the old book, Florida Enchantments by Arthur Dimmock, which had inspired us to leave civilization. Dimmock wrote, "To be lost in the 10,000 islands is one's normal condition and of no significance." Well, it was sure significant to us. We had to navigate our way through this formidable frontier, a place where all traces of murders, suicides, missing persons, or airplane crashes are swallowed up by the great green sponge of the Everglades sawgrass, or buried forever beneath the black, muddy blotter of the mangrove jungle. We were grateful for such a fine landmark as the one-tree island of Jewel Key, which had marked the entrance to Sandfly Pass for many generations. When this lone red mangrove was swept away in 1960 by Hurricane Donna, we tried twice to replant another one, but without success. Here the red mangrove is ruler, an emperor of trees. It dominates the landscape with its thick, rubbery roots like great hanging cables, making it truly the tree that walks on stilts. This remarkable tree rarely grows more than 1.25 miles from salt water. It even takes root in salt water and collects soil around itself, forming new land wherever it moves. Unfortunately, as man has drained the Everglades, the fresh water has poured out into the Gulf, and the salt water has marched inland. One unexpected problem was the swift 4 or 5 knot tides that ripped through the passes out to the Gulf. In a canoe with 1,200 pounds of gear and only 6 inches of freeboard, the only thing we could do was hang onto a branch until the crest passed, or pray we could get our 3.5 horsepower motor started, even though it only went 6 knots. We hoped the long months of studying tides, winds, and weather patterns, of buttonholing the local fishermen to learn when, where, and how to catch fish would start paying off, because we would be foraging for 50% of our food. Our binoculars here were not just for bird watching. They could spot a mess of mullet or sea trout jumping a long way off. That meant pulling out our jointed cane pole, attaching our yellow bucktail bobber, and getting down to business. I said, "Hey, I'm going fishing." By the time we reached our next campsite, we'd usually have supper all ready to cook. We soon appreciated the comment of one fisherman who said, "It's a mighty far piece between get-out places down here." Any spot over 6 inches above high water is considered a great campsite. This charming location was called Lonesome Mound on our chart, and no wonder. It looked as lonesome and grubby as a junkyard dog. It was 4 inches deep in pure mud. "Give it up," I pleaded. "Let's keep on looking." By now we had been paddling for days in the rain, carefully refilling our 7-gallon canteens. We did find a dry site, built a fire, and soon had that essential requisite of a tired, wet explorer, a hot cup of coffee. Notice my handy kitchen shelves and our improvised frying pan, a cake pan with a fork for a handle. Once Orrin complained that my coffee tasted burned. I had filled our canteens downstream from a brush fire getting ashes into the water and had just invented barbecued coffee. So what do you do when it rains for 2 weeks in camp? Well, I sent my husband to pick out a new carpet. Or rather, I sent him out to pick a new carpet. Big difference. He spent several hours sloshing through the swamps, gathering these leather fern, and soon we had a fantastic designer rug to walk around on and keep the mud out of the tent. It's so nice to have an Eagle Scout around. One morning I woke to find we had caught 8 inches of fresh water overnight in our improvised cistern, Monocotee. I was so happy to have enough fresh water to wash things in after months of bathing, shampooing, and doing our laundry in salt water that I washed everything in camp, whether it needed it or not. The camp quickly turned into a Chinese laundry. Orrin was afraid I would decide to wash even the charts and we would be lost forever. So what was Orrin doing all this time? He was hard at work, foraging for food. Translated loosely, folks, he was fishing. But I couldn't blame him for that. Those noisy snook and tarpon had kept us both awake at night for the past week. Every so often, to get away from our 24 hours a day, 7-day-a-week togetherness, and to give Orrin a break too, I went on scouting trips away from camp on my own. Sometimes the fragile beauty of the orchids, the pineapple air plants, and ferns distracted me from my main purpose, learning the land as well as my husband. If Orrin had a serious accident, snake bite, a broken leg, or even a heart attack, I would be responsible for getting us both back to civilization from wherever we were. And that could be as far as 35 to 55 miles away. I always kept an eye out for wild creatures such as this perfectly camouflaged tawny bobcat basking on the bank at Lossman's River. I was glad to be looking at it through a telephoto lens, however. Even a wildcat can be dangerous if she's guarding young kits. Once on such a trip, I saw a Florida panther, and we had seen one regularly at Sunset Lodge in Everglades City in the winter of 1958. Panther attacks, though rare, have been documented. Panther were quickly being wiped off the planet by fast cars and too many subdivisions in their ancient hunting grounds. We heard a panther very near our camp one night when we had been smoking fish, and the cry was eerie, like a Siamese cat, but decibels louder. Some say it sounds like a woman screaming in pain. I think it was hungry and desperate, begging us to go away. Getting back to camp after dark was a bit spooky, wondering what else might be lurking out there in the shadows. Snakes? Bear? Wild boar? I was not thrilled at seeing poisonous snakes, but I had been scared almost speechless over the old-timers' tales of deadly cottonmouths dropping off trees into their boats, especially near the notorious Plate Creek, at that time a wild, unmarked passage between Alligator Bay and Four Island Bay in Lossman's River. Around the campfire, I practically earned a Boy Scout merit badge in snakes. I asked Orrin 1,000 questions. Can a cottonmouth strike you underwater? You bet. How far can a rattler strike? 2/3 the length of its body. I learned that rattlesnakes strike defensively at any warm-blooded body nearby, but will often run from you. That cottonmouths strike offensively at what they plan to kill, and cottonmouths can make you run from them. Our next destination was an island in the lower Florida Keys, where we hoped to shoot the first professional movie footage of the then almost extinct miniature key deer. In 1957, only about 28 deer were believed to be left in the Keys. Our route lay down Lossman's River past the wide deserted beaches of Cape Sable, the southernmost point on the mainland United States, and across the open waters of Florida Bay. 35 miles of waters rich in natural nutrients that provide a nursery for the teeming shrimp, shellfish, and game fish industry. Around us in the shallow waters were sawfish, green turtles, huge brain coral, and many forms of sea life. But the bay was so smooth today we felt as if we were riding the nose cone of a rocket through outer space. 6 hours later, as we passed the swift deep-water cuts, which connect the Gulf of Mexico with the Atlantic Ocean, we hit really choppy water. We were thankful for our trusty little motor, believe you me. Florida Bay's reputation for being the most treacherous shark-infested bay in the U.S. is well-deserved. Ahead of us lay the terra incognita of No Name Key. As we pulled ashore, we learned why it got its name. No name could possibly describe the armada of angry, stinging, saltwater mosquitoes that attacked us. On with the camouflage jackets and GI head nets, which we had pre-treated the night before with off and 612 bug repellents. They were worth their weight in gold. We went ashore through this strange landscape of black mangroves. Unlike the red mangroves, the blacks send up small aerial roots called pneumatophores, which look rather like miniature cypress knees. Walking through them was fun, like hopping about on sponges. We found a well dug by early Tarpon Springs sponge fishermen who lived here while they dove off the reefs. In the Civil War, white settlers had also lived here, planting 2,000 sapodilla trees, tomatoes, and other fruits and vegetables, which were shipped by schooner to Key West and then by freighter to New York City. As we walked, we looked for signs of key deer browse. We knew they ate sea grapes, cocoa plums, and browsed on fern fiddleheads and cactus. We didn't even see sign of their tiny hoof marks in the muddy ground at the foot of these black mangrove trees. Yet some instinct told me that even now we might be the ones who were being watched. They were so tiny they could hide anywhere, only standing about 22 or 24 inches at the shoulder, no bigger than a setter dog. On our way inland, Orrin pointed out some delicious cocoa plum berries and sea grapes which we could gather. Then he introduced me to a fruit which was new to me, sapodillas. which are not native to Florida and which taste somewhere between a banana and a pear. Lucky for me, Orrin was not only an expert ornithologist, but also knew a lot about botany and entomology, or bugs. I said, "Oh, I'll try these berries over here. They look good." He yelled, "Hey, get away from there! Get away from there! What's the matter with you? Are you crazy? That's poison wood. If you ate those berries, it would be the end of this whole trip." And then began our longest ordeal, spending 3.5 weeks wading through the head-high bracken fern forests in the heat of jolly old July on No Name, praying for a single glimpse of the little creatures. One afternoon there was a terrible rainstorm. We were delighted. We washed all our clothes, and Orrin ran around like a madman, putting out our red tubs and filling up the now empty plastic food containers. This innocent yellow flower is the Jamaica dogwood or fish poison tree. Every day for weeks, Orrin spent hours in the hot wildlife blind, and despite the repellent, was covered with mosquitoes. This little rackety coon seemed as puzzled as we were. I'm sure he knew where they were hiding. When we least expected it, we were favored with one of the most exciting experiences in wildlife photography. A young key deer doe about the size of a teddy bear came ambling out of the bracken fern and simply turned and stared at us. Orrin had waited so long and so patiently for this moment that he had a rare attack of buck fever and forgot to use his shutter release cord, but instead put both hands on the camera. His hand shook so badly as he held the camera that it looked as if he had St. Vitus' dance. Then, to his consternation, the doe bounded off, and in her place came a proud 4-point spike buck in velvet. He posed majestically for us, almost as if he'd been waiting for the opportunity a long time. Then he turned quite nonchalantly and began to saunter away. Orrin panicked. "What can I do to stop him?" he whispered. "I've got 50 more feet of film left." "Try that little whistle you used up in the mountains of North Carolina," I suggested. He whistled. Nothing happened at first. And then the deer stopped in his tracks. He was so curious he couldn't resist it. "What's that, Mac? You calling me? Well, sure, I'll come out and pose for you. Why didn't you say so in the first place?" Then he bounded off into the underbrush, and we both went back to camp and poured a very large steaming cup of coffee. We had done it. The next day, Orrin photographed a great white heron on the same road, in the same position as the key deer to give some idea of its tiny size. This new visitor became a great pal of ours. We named him Uncle Fudd. When we arrived on the key, Uncle Fudd's chief occupation was trying to hypnotize lizards and butterflies so that he could spear them for dinner. In other words, he was a lousy fisherman and was almost starving to death when we first met him. He would much rather eat fish, but he simply didn't have the technique down. Maybe if I took a few lessons. Say, what's going on over there? I believe that human has a fish on the end of that stick in the water. Maybe he'll show me how he does it. It was more than Uncle Fudd could stand. He spent hours observing Orrin's fishing technique. Orrin found there was great fishing in the shallows beside the jagged pilings, which were the remains of the old historic ferry boat landing. In the late 20s and early 1930s, the ferry had provided a vital link for motorists traveling between Marathon and Key West. Later, when I came back from a morning fishing trip over the reef with a fine catch of snapper, redfish, and jack, Uncle Fudd went wild. "I'll just sneak over there in my best James Bond 007 manner. I'll bet I can sweet-talk that chick into a big mess of fish. Hi, hun. That's a swinging suntan you got there. What are you doing for dinner tonight?" "Thanks, but I've already made a dinner date with that gentleman over there." "Wouldn't you know, somebody else has to horn in. Well, I sure can't compete with him. I'll see you around." Tonight, Orrin marinated fish in fresh coconut milk, key lime juice, and hot peppers, then broiled it. We had enjoyed a fabulous visit to the Keys. Up the coast to explore Nocatee, the place beyond the river, the unknown land. One of the most interesting but not the largest prehistoric sites in the 10,000 Islands are the 36 mounds of Turner River, which rise to 25 feet above the water and cover over 35 acres. They were built by Calusa Indians between 1000 and 1400 AD, entirely of oyster and clam shells. Only Johnson Mound and Gopher Key are larger, between 45 and 55 acres each. On top of the plateau are higher mounds where the old Calusa chiefs or caciques built their palm-thatched huts, much like today's Seminoles build their chiquis. The Calusa were great craftsmen, fishermen, and warriors who held political power over all of South Florida for hundreds of years. We picked up pottery and arrowheads over 600 years old, lying on the ground. The Calusas were cannibals who practiced dismembered burial, but they were also engineers who cut amazingly precise, long, palm-lined canals through the Everglades, possibly for safe passage in stormy weather. Astronauts even spotted these canals from outer space. Although this was high ground, I did not want to pitch my tent on top of a cannibal cemetery, so we paddled on upriver, swatting bugs along the way. We were glad to see this mullet jumping ahead. It was a harbinger of good fishing grounds nearby. I always kept an eye open for spider webs. Once I counted 11 spiders on me after we ducked under some overhanging trees, but at least they weren't cottonmouth moccasins. What did I do about them? I blew them off. I sure wasn't going to squash them on me. Spiders love to make their home in bromeliads or air plants like this one. We found an excellent campsite with a hard sandy harbor that made it easy getting in and out of the boat. We christened it Camp Welcome Sight. Orrin took a long look at the neighborhood we would be camping in for the next 2 months. I was glad this was no longer the territory of the prehistoric mastodon, the giant 8-foot tree sloth, or the saber-toothed tiger. I struggled to unload these heavy gearboxes, which weighed between 50 and 70 pounds each. When I protested, he said, "Well, if anything crucial happened to me, you'd have to do it by yourself anyway, so you may as well get practice now." Husband logic number 1. Our big tarp gave us lots of walk-around room in the rain. The easiest thing to do at Camp Welcome Sight was put down your tent poles. What do you do on Thanksgiving Day in the sawgrass? Orrin, an excellent cook, decided to forage for a gourmet treat, heart of palm, or swamp cabbage as we Florida crackers call it. Luckily, we were outside national park boundaries when he cut down this cabbage palm. He did it the pioneer way, without an electric saw. It took him 45 minutes of really hard hacking to fell it, using his sharp machete for an axe. To celebrate the holiday, I broke out our supply of jerked ham we'd made back on the Hermit's Island. There were 63 pieces, 6 meals, 5 pieces per person per meal. It looks like a dried date here, but when it's soaked in hot water to reconstitute it, you can't tell it from the original ham. Swamp cabbage is delicious raw, sweeter and tenderer than regular cabbage, and a banquet when served with ham jerky. I made this alligator tooth necklace from carcasses I found rotting in the swamp when we stumbled on a secret camp where gator poachers had shot and skinned their prey. We used brass chains for our 3-speed campfire because they wouldn't burn our fingers when we adjusted the speed by raising or lowering the pot. When Orrin brings in the sheaves for Thanksgiving, he does it in a big way. At first I thought he was building a fort. Then I thought it must be the largest fish smoker we'd ever had, or the smallest outhouse. Please, go down to the river and get the fish, he said. I went to our jungle refrigerator. A fishnet bag hung in the river, which served as a live well. I jumped back quickly. A large snake had crawled into the bag, eaten 3 of our fish, and was too swollen to get out. I grabbed our handy mop-handle snake killer and quickly disposed of it, then carried it back to the management to complain. See what I found in the bathtub over there? Yeah, well, that's too bad. I told you not to throw the fish entrails in the river beside camp. It always attracts snakes and gators. I got work to do here. We needed a large smoker because we had to store up food for a few weeks of exploring and wouldn't have time to fish every day. These cake rack grills sure came in handy. Smothering the fillets in green buttonwood leaves gave them a superb piquant flavor. We liked it better than hickory or even mesquite smoke. These are nice fat fillets of bass, but for the first 2 weeks of our safari, we caught fish like these, the size most people buy for an indoor aquarium. In 6 months, we caught, cooked, and ate 800 pounds of fish, and during one period, we had fish 3 times a day for 6 weeks. I didn't mind cutting and hauling in the firewood, but when I asked Orrin why the wiregrass was flattened down in a long path inland to a pond, he said, "Gator trail. Probably a 12 or 14 footer made that. Keep your eyes open when you go outside the tent at night to relieve yourself. You could step on him. Not in my wildest dreams." A week later, I saw this baby, and after that I chopped wood in fast forward speed. "What on earth are you doing now?" I asked. "I thought we were going for a bath." "We are, but first I have to vacuum out our jungle bathtub to get rid of all the fish entrails so we won't be visited by the mate to that snake you gigged. It could have been a cottonmouth." In November, the temperature at night at Camp Welcome site sometimes dropped to 28 degrees. Today it's 40 degrees in the sun, but the water temperature was around 38, so we took a very fast bath. And speaking of dinner, that smoked fish was fabulous. We learned then that by lightly salting, then cool smoking our fillets for 8 to 10 hours, we could preserve them for 3 weeks, or until the next day, whichever came first. The first week here, I spoiled about 50 pounds of smoked fish by letting it sit out in the air to cool down before packing it away in sealed plastic cartons. A few days later, when I opened the cartons, all the fish were covered with crawly white maggots. The flies had done their job better than I did. From then on, we made sure that the smoker was always covered with these colored bilge boards and the fillets instantly packed in plastic cartons. We couldn't escape housework, even in the swamps. But surprisingly, Orrin and I usually fought for the privilege of doing the dishes. Why? Because hundreds of minnows always came to help us. All I had to do was ring the dinner spoon, and they would come in droves, or schools, to help finish off our breakfast, which usually consisted of oatmeal, crackers, and peanut butter. They went crazy for peanut butter. Of course, in our camp, you ate whatever was left over from supper for breakfast. You've got to be really hungry to sit down to snook chowder or smoked fish and grits at dawn, and we were. Sometimes at Camp Welcome site in winter, when it was too cold to sleep, we would get up at 2 or 3 in the morning, build a little fire for coffee and oatmeal, and load all our camera gear, plus our 6-foot step ladder, which served as a mud tripod, into the Nocatee. In the dark, we would paddle far up Turner's River so we could set up our cameras deep in the sawgrass before sunrise, when flocks of birds left their rookeries in the mangroves to dine at the great feasting table. Some of these egrets, herons, ibis, and stork fly in from as far as 50 miles to pick up breakfast. What a perfect location for a fast food store. This bittern here, hidden in the grass, can scare the dickens out of you if you surprise him. During a 6-month period, we saw fewer than a dozen alligators. Even as recently as the late 1950s, Local alligator poachers were still killing them, and they were on the verge of extinction until the federal government passed legislation to save them. Alligators, at least, are out of danger and are reproducing at a tremendous rate. In a distant hammock, we spotted a full-size Florida white-tailed deer, about 3 times as big as a key deer. This one stood still as a statue to protect her new fawn, still in its camouflage spots. I learned to pole Seminole style through the shallow, fresh waters. Camouflage suits helped to keep off the mosquitoes and deer flies which stung us despite the cool weather and the insect repellent. Guess they didn't read the label. A huge problem in Florida was the hyacinth invasion, which cost the state about $3 million a year to try to get rid of them. At first, the Fish and Game Commission brought in manatee to control them because manatee can eat 200 to 300 pounds of hyacinths a day. Unfortunately, manatee was the very favorite wild game of 10,000 islanders who were shooting them and serving them up for supper as fast as the Game Commission could put them into the creeks. Hyacinths choke the once fast-moving creeks, much as the mangroves do, making it difficult for game fish like bass or brim to find food. They also made it extremely difficult for explorers. Finally, we reached the most beautiful cove we had ever seen, the headwaters of Turner's River. We called it the Seminole Garden of Eden. Like all Edens, it had its serpent, a deadly pit viper, the fabled cottonmouth moccasin. It senses its prey through those special pits on the side of its triangular head. Unaware of it, I blithely stepped ashore to explore this primitive cypress and swamp apple scene. Lucky for me, the snake had just dined on a fat fish and slithered away into the swamp. Around us bloomed alamanda and water lettuce. The Dahoon holly shown here is used to make the purifying black draught, a fierce drink used by the Seminoles in their green corn dance. One of our greatest fears was coming onto the back of a manatee and being turned completely upside down. But we also had to watch for submerged driftwood logs like this one, which turned out to be not a log at all, but an alligator, whom we nicknamed Albert. Albert was so fascinated with us, he followed us for 4 days as we took pictures of the real wildlife. I've seen a lot of crazy birders, but this one sure takes the cake. One of our favorite survival salads was the cattail tuber, a sprout that grows out of the root of the cattail and resembles an elephant tusk. I tried to beat the coots to these tubers because I had read that all parts of the cattail were good to eat. That depends on how desperate you are, I suppose. Later, I found only the smallest tips were good. The rest of these stalks were so tough and stringy it was like chewing rope. I wasn't really proficient at fishing, but I saw something ahead in the water that truly inspired me. Blue claws. Stop the boat, grab the keg, get out the red tubs. Crabs, I understood. These blue crabs had come inland from the Gulf of Mexico, some 12 to 15 miles, following the salt water line. Prior to 1935, all the creeks and rivers of the 10,000 islands had run fresh right out to the Gulf and beyond, a fact which we learned and reported to the state archaeologist. Back in camp, the mess of blue claws combined with the cattail tubers made a jungle gourmet dish fit for a king. A young friend of mine seeing this picture declared, "Them ain't cattails, ma'am. You can't fool me. Them's French fries." Didn't I wish they were? Early one chilly morning, I crawled out of the tent to see that the canoe was gone. Also, Orrin. Hooray, a day to myself! My thermal suit felt good. Our thermometer read 36 degrees. Over a big pot of coffee, I decided to catch up in my sadly neglected journal. And to my intense surprise, saw that the date was December the 25th, Christmas Day. We had completely forgotten about it. What could I do to celebrate? I had an idea. Orrin, who was usually awake by 4:30 every morning, had headed up to his favorite cattail lake, digging the paddle into the icy waters and shivering in the stiff breeze. Attaching his banana lure to the fly casting rod, he cast far out over the water in hopes of snagging some big black bass. We had learned from observation and necessity that the size of the bass decreased every hour of the day after sunrise, at which time you could bag some really hefty ones. He had to be so careful pulling in a fish through all that eel grass because he always stood the chance of losing his lure, and we only had a finite number to spare. Once at the very end of our trip, he was down to our last banana lure. The hula poppers were long gone by then, so I suggested he cut the banana in half and paint the exposed ends with lipstick. It worked. The fish didn't know they couldn't outwit Mother Revlon. I found a pretty wild buckthorn tree near our camp and quickly cut it down and brought it back to camp. The easiest Christmas tree I ever got. Using a little ingenuity, I removed all the instant food wrappers and yellow cardboard film containers, and with my fingernail scissors began cutting out decorations and ornaments for our Christmas tree. For days afterward, we were never quite sure what food we were fixing for dinner with all the wrappers removed. But I never thought of that. I was having such fun. A friendly Jiminy Cricket, well, okay, it was a grasshopper, sidewalk superintendent, strolled over to inspect the project. The last ornament was a silver star cut from the inside of the dried milk carton. I was just filling Orrin's stocking with a box of small peppermint candy canes, which I had hidden in my half of our clothing box when he returned to camp. Christmas! Good heavens! I can't believe we forgot all about it. He looked stupefied, then rallied and said, "Well, I didn't forget all about it. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Santa." And he handed me a mess of cold, slimy bass to clean and fillet. "Why, thank you, sir. I assume this gift includes the usual cleaning and filleting?" "Naturally." Even on a special day like this, first things must come first, and survival food was always our first priority. We would usually clean and skin the fish as soon as they were caught, then salt them down and keep them in a covered pot in a cool place. We found that the flavor was much better than fish fixed any other way. After this job, Orrin surprised me with a real present, which he also had hidden under his half of the clothing box for the past 6 months. A tiny can of fruit cake, my favorite cake. We built up a warm bonfire, broke out about a week's supply of popcorn, and even poured a real libation out of our survival box ration to celebrate. We had located, cut, and cleared a chain of 26 campsites no more than 15 miles apart, which are still used today by visitors to this pristine area. We had returned from No Name Key with the first movies of the endangered key deer, and we had spent a glorious 8 months as the guest and good friend of the world's most popular hermit. We had braved the elements and gone where few or none had ever gone before, often canoeing right off the maps we carried into the unknown land, into Nocatee. We felt kinship with the wild creatures who lived around us in this sawgrass manger, and we felt a peace and serenity that was closer than ever to the true meaning of Christmas on our first Christmas in the Everglades.